In France, during the 1700s, a special baby girl was born. Her name was Jeanne Vaubernier, and her parents' love story was forbidden. Her father was a monk, and her mother was a poor cook. Most people thought Jeanne would live a simple life, hidden away like many poor people of her time, but Jeanne was different. She was ready to change her fate. Jeanne's mother, Anne, worked as a helper in the house of a kind man named Monsieur Dumas. He saw something special in little Jeanne and wanted to help her. He gave her a home and taught her many things, as she loved to learn. But since he couldn't say she was his daughter, he decided to send her to live at St. Aure convent, hoping to keep her safe from the hard life that poor young women often faced. As Jeanne grew up in the convent, she felt more and more trapped, but she found a window to the outside world through books, some of them quite surprising. These secret books showed her things about love, beauty, and how to use her charm. When the nuns found out about her reading these forbidden books, they made her leave the convent. Jeanne went back to Monsieur Dumas' house, but she couldn't stay long. Madame Dumas was worried that her husband might fall in love with the beautiful young Jeanne. She accused Jeanne and her mother of stealing something they didn't take just to make them leave. With no choice left, Jeanne and her mother moved to Paris, where Jeanne found work reading books to a widow named Madame Lagarde, who lived with her 2 sons. In Paris, Jeanne quickly learned how to fit in with rich people, but trouble found her again when Madame Lagarde discovered her getting close to both her sons. Instead of feeling ashamed, Jeanne decided to use her beauty and charm to make money. Soon, she became one of Paris's most famous companions to wealthy men. Then she met Count Guillaume du Barry. He fell in love with her, and through him, Jeanne once again found herself among the rich and powerful. This time, she didn't try to hide who she really was. The powerful Duke of Richelieu noticed how beautiful and charming she was. He thought King Louis XV would like her company and suggested this to du Barry. But nobody asked what Jeanne wanted. She was tired of being du Barry's pretty decoration, while he spent time with other women. The only reason she stayed was because she loved his son, Adolphe. One night, something terrible happened. Du Barry found Jeanne reading when he had told her to rest. He got so angry that he pushed her into a bathtub and told her she would always be nothing but a poor woman selling her love. Even after this, du Barry made Jeanne go meet King Louis XV. He was more handsome than she had imagined, and he looked at her in a special way, something no man had done in a long time. The king quickly made up his mind. He sent his best servant, Laborde, to bring Jeanne to him, giving du Barry money to let her go. King Louis XV had chosen Jeanne as his new special friend, and he waited for her in one of the most beautiful places in the world, his amazing home, the Palace of Versailles. The king's doctors checked her health because of her past with many men. Then Laborde, the king's servant, taught her how to act properly in Versailles. When Jeanne asked if he would teach her how to speak like the rich people, Laborde told her not to worry. The king didn't care about listening to her talk. When Jeanne finally met King Louis in his bedroom, something funny happened. She couldn't help but laugh nervously because he looked exactly like his picture on the 6-franc coin. Instead of getting angry, the king laughed with her. They spent time together, but it felt like more than just a simple meeting between a king and his companion. The next day, instead of sending her away, the king did something surprising. He kept her in a secret room where she could watch his daily life. It was full of boring rules and ceremonies. Sometimes the king would look at her during these formal moments, asking for help with his eyes or sharing a secret joke. Jeanne saw how the royal family had to walk backwards when leaving the king's room. Nobody was allowed to turn their back to him. But Jeanne was special. She could walk normally. When the king was finally free from all his royal duties, he met with Jeanne again. He gave her a beautiful necklace and asked her something important. Would she stay at Versailles forever? He even offered to give her a noble title. This shows how Jeanne was becoming more than just another companion to the king. She was becoming someone special in his life. Jeanne started watching all of King Louis's events secretly, with Laborde helping her understand everything. She noticed something interesting. The king's daughters were always around, but the queen was nowhere to be seen. Laborde explained that the queen was a quiet person who put up with her husband seeing other women. But before Laborde could tell Jeanne more, they had to hide quickly because the king's daughters almost saw their new stepmother. When the queen died, King Louis spent even more time with Jeanne. His daughters were very sad about losing their mother, and they got angry when they heard rumors about a bad woman walking around the palace. When they asked their father about it, he told them half the truth. Yes, he was seeing someone, but she was married and had a son. His daughters knew he wasn't telling the whole story. King Louis wanted to make his relationship with Jeanne official, but there was a problem. She needed to be married before she could join the royal court. So he paid Count du Barry a lot of money to marry her. Jeanne became Countess du Barry, but she didn't care much about the title. She spent her time learning royal manners with Laborde's help. When Jeanne finally appeared at court as Countess du Barry, she wore a beautiful outfit that made everyone stare, especially the king. She did something very bold. When she bowed to the king, she looked right into his eyes. This was not allowed because the king was the most powerful person in France. His daughters got very angry and stormed out, but the king couldn't take his eyes off Jeanne. During the event, King Louis gave Jeanne a surprising gift, an Indian slave named Zamore. Jeanne joked that she better be careful what she says about the gift or she might end up in jail, but she was actually very happy with Zamore, and soon they were running around Versailles together like a mother and child. Because the king loved her so much, Jeanne brought new life to Versailles. She filled the palace with art and nature, inviting the best artists and writers from Paris to visit. She became the most important lady at Versailles, but this wouldn't last forever. In Austria, a young Marie Antoinette was getting ready to come to France as the new queen. Knowing her time might be limited, Jeanne decided to make sure everyone would remember her. Instead of following boring palace rules, she showed her true self, fun, bright, and different from everyone else. The king gave her a special gift, her own mansion away from the palace where she could be completely free and act however she wanted. When Jeanne had to visit Versailles, she still had problems with the king's daughters. They were mean about Zamore, calling him just a pet, even though Jeanne saw him as her special helper. Only Louise, the king's youngest daughter, was nice to Jeanne. Louise was different from her sisters. She was more grown up and understanding. Later, Louise surprised everyone by leaving the palace to live a normal life, away from all the royal rules. When Louise left, King Louis became very sad. He started spending time with other women, but none of them made him happy like Jeanne did. Still, he didn't give Jeanne enough attention. Laborde told her the truth. Yes, the king had other women because he liked new things, but Jeanne was still his favorite. Of course, Jeanne wasn't allowed to see other men. That was strictly forbidden. But things got better. The king became happy again and fell back in love with Jeanne. They spent 4 wonderful years together at Versailles. During this time, Zamore grew up to be a well-educated young man who practiced sword fighting with Adolphe, Dubarry's son, who had also joined the royal court. Big changes came to Versailles when the king's grandson married Marie Antoinette from Austria. She would be the next queen of France, which meant trouble for Jeanne. But King Louis made sure everyone knew they had to respect Jeanne. When Marie Antoinette first met Jeanne, she was amazed by how beautiful and natural she was. But the king's daughters kept calling Jeanne bad names and wanted to get rid of her. This caused arguments at dinner. The men loved Jeanne's charm, while the women were jealous. Young Marie Antoinette felt stuck in the middle but chose to listen to the king's daughters, who were the real troublemakers in this story. Then something very sad happened. Jeanne missed an important palace event because Adolphe, who was like a son to her, got hurt badly in a sword fight. She rushed to be with him, but she could only stay by his side with Dubarry as Adolphe died. After losing her dear Adolphe, Jeanne realized the king's love was all she had left. Nobody else accepted her, and the future queen still ignored her. King Louis got very angry about how people treated Jeanne. He faced Marie Antoinette directly and told her to speak to Jeanne, but Marie Antoinette, listening to bad advice from others, ignored Jeanne again. This made the king so mad that everyone could tell just by looking at his face. After seeing how angry the king was, Marie Antoinette finally spoke to Jeanne for the first time. It wasn't much, just a small comment, but Jeanne was so happy that she ran to tell the king. She thought the royal family would finally accept her, but life had different plans for Jeanne and the king's love story. King Louis became very sick with a dangerous illness. Laborde told Jeanne to leave quickly before the royal family could force her out, but Jeanne refused to go. She loved the king too much to leave him when he was so sick. She stayed by his side until he knew he was dying. Before the king could make his final confession, the priest demanded something difficult. King Louis had to give up his sinful life with Jeanne and turn to God. With a heavy heart, the king asked Jeanne to leave Versailles. But she came back one last time to say goodbye. Most of the royal family tried to stop her, but the Dauphin, the king's grandson, let her see Louis one final time. Alone with her king, Jeanne told him she would love him forever. She made him smile one last time. When she left, she didn't turn her back on him. She walked backwards, just like in the old days, but this time nobody laughed. Before dying, King Louis made Laborde promise to always take care of Jeanne. This was the king's final wish. After Louis died, his grandson became the new king, and Marie Antoinette became queen. They sent Jeanne to the same convent where she lived as a young girl, Saint-Auré. She stayed there for a year, locked up for her sins, until the new king let her go free. He only asked one thing, that she never come near Versailles again. Jeanne lived peacefully for 15 years in her old home. Then, during the French Revolution, Marie Antoinette surprisingly asked to be her friend.